Good morning, members of parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, and those following via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this meeting of the Committee of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, VROMI, today on Friday, March 20th, 2026. I would like to give a special welcome to the Honorable Minister of VROMI, Mr. Patrice Gomes, and his support staff. We have established a quorum of 7 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received a notice of absence from the following members: MP Sarah Westcott Williams and MP Egbert Durang, due to a work visit, and also a notice of absence from MP Lyndon Lewis. And I've also received a notice of lateness from MP Omar Atli and MP Viran Kutai. Are there any notifications at this time? I see MP Irion has a notification. MP, you have the floor.
I think
Oh, you was first. MP, I see that MP Roseberg was first, so MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Blessed morning to the Minister of VROMI and his support staff. Blessed morning to the Secretary General and to my honorable colleagues present here today, and to the listening public viewing and listening online. On behalf of the URSM faction, I would like to take a moment to extend my thoughts and prayers to the 3 police officers who were injured in yesterday's accident while carrying out their duty. As we all know, our officers put themselves on the line every day to keep our community safe, and moments like these remind us of the risk they take on a daily basis to serve us all. And therefore, I'm wishing them strength and a full and speedy recovery. And my thoughts of the URSM faction are also with their families and loved ones during this difficult time, and also much strength seeing that the KPSM is understaffed. So also much strength and safety to the other officers that still have to carry out their duty. Let us continue having them in our prayers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. The next MP for your notification is MP Ardel Irion. MP Irion, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to our SG, members of Parliament, the Honorable Minister of VROMI and his support staff, and the viewing public. I would also like to wish the officers injured in speedy recovery and well wishes also. And also to the Minister of VROMI is here. There's a lot of concerns regarding the road or not being a road being the issue. I think outside of the officers potentially being injured because of the road, we saw that the community of Soccergarden themselves were in an uproar concerning this road, and they've said that they've been complaining about this road. So I would like that we can look into that as soon as possible. Mr. Chairman, in the we had a MP, a faction leader the other day mentioned that some meetings we could just send a letter and send the questions in. And I said, that we don't get our answers. So just to make it clear to the Minister of VROMI, because last time the Minister of VROMI, through you, Mr. Chairman, sort of blamed the Parliament for not getting updates on their letters and meetings. So I'd like to mention to the Minister here in my notification that, Minister, there is a meeting, an urgent meeting called on the garbage contracts, which was called before the garbage debacle. And there's also questions sent to you. I could get an IS number, and we haven't gotten any response. I believe the time to respond has already surpassed or not. We haven't gotten any update on this. So can you please, 1, have the meeting, and 2, get an update from you on our questions posed. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irion, for your notification. The next MP for notification is MP La Cruz. MP, you have the floor.
A blessed morning, Mr. Chairman, Griffier, Minister and his support staff, my fellow colleagues, and all those listening and watching via the social media. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the United People's Party and my family, we would like to send out our prayers, thoughts on the police officers that got in the accident yesterday. It was, if I must say, a very stressful 3 hours for myself, being on a flight coming back and not knowing exactly what took place and how it ended. And I'd like to echo the letter that came out from the union concerning the insurance from the officers. So if the Minister of Justice could look into that as soon as possible, because that was definitely the first thing that went through my mind. Then my fellow colleague just mentioned to the Minister of VROMI concerning the garbage situation, the meeting, and I'd like to just if the minister could give us an update when that will take place so we could hear exactly what is happening and what is going to happen, because the people are a little frustrated seeing how the place is looking. Then, Mr. Chairman, one more notification, and this is to the Prime Minister and the Civil Registry. I think a meeting needs to be called so we could get a proper update on what is going on with the long waits, the lines, and maybe the plan of the Civil Registry. A person just called me this morning to discuss a problem that he lost his passport while traveling and went through the ringer to be able to even get a passport, an emergency passport, while in Netherlands to come back home. And I got a picture of my daughter's ID card that looks like the passport itself, and it's very much the information on it. So maybe a suggestion to the Civil Registry that we move into that direction. Same thing for driver's licenses, can't be used in other countries. So maybe that the government could start to look into that. And that will be all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP de Cruz. Are there any more notifications at this time? I see no need. We move forward to the meeting. The agenda points for this meeting are: Agenda Point 1, discussion on the current state of national housing in Sint Maarten, including government planning, land use, and institutional capacity. I'm coming in with IS 1057 from the year 2024-2025, dated May 19, 2025. And Agenda Point 2, a follow-up discussion with the Minister of VROMI on the cemetery capacity, development planning, and related infrastructure policy, coming in IS 396 from the year 2025-2026, dated November 2026 of the year November 26 of the year 2025. These agenda points were requested by MP Darrell York. We immediately move over to Agenda Point 1. On May 19, 2025, Parliament received a letter, IS 1057 from the year 2024-2025 from MP Darrell York, with the request that a meeting of the Committee of VROMI be convened to address the above-mentioned agenda point. It is good to note that on January 9, 2025, Parliament received a letter from the Minister of VROMI, IS 438 from the year 2024-2025, with attached a letter from the World Bank dated October 30th, 2024, regarding the Sint Maarten social housing project. In relation to this letter, the Honorable Minister of VROMI was invited to a meeting of the Committee of VROMI of Parliament scheduled for March 6, 2026 for a discussion on the Sint Maarten social housing project and social housing in general, based on the above-mentioned letter from the Minister. However, on February 28, 2025, Parliament received a letter from the Minister with IS 658 from the year 2024-2025 in response to the invitation in which the Minister requested Parliament that the meeting be rescheduled for a later date as discussions surrounding the development of a policy for the Sint Maarten social housing project was still ongoing and would also allow for the contributions of Parliament to be considered towards drafting an inclusive and comprehensive policy. These documents can be found on the Parliament General Teams. Hence today, this first agenda point. At this point, if the MP feels the need to, I will first give the floor to the requester of the meeting, MP Darrell York, to elucidate his request. MP York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the Minister, support staff, honorable colleagues, and the viewing public. Minister and Mr. Chairman, it's important to note, indeed, this meeting was called or requested averagely a year ago. One correction on what was just said, The letter sent by the minister in January 2025 was a response to the meeting request made by my person on the 9th of January 2025. So that was just missing from the record. Furthermore, it is paramount that we discuss the state of housing on our beautiful island of Sint Maarten. At the end of the day, we've been in here in this house for about a year and a half now. We haven't broached the topic as yet. And given all of the ills and quells of our people, and last year, numerous articles released by the minister on the topic, it's important that the public, including Parliament.
Thank you, MP York.
Like late yesterday afternoon, that's now in the paper. I think it's only fair, like late yesterday afternoon, that's now in the paper. I think it's only fair to also give time for an investigation to be concluded regarding the actual cause of this accident, while of course not negating that we do have an infrastructure crisis on the island. I think it's very important to also recognize to fix infrastructure, you need money. As I recall stating just in the budget 2025, which was approved, I have an operational budget for roads of 600,000 guilders. Now, I don't know, this is a rhetorical question no one really has to answer, but through you, Mr. Chairman, does a member of Parliament know the cost on average of fixing one main road on Sint Maarten? Now, I can tell you, in addition to having limited financial capacity to do those roads, it's also the question about the ability that you have with your 600,000 guilders to actually make an intervention on a road. 600,000 guilders, now of course, 600,000 guilders goes to third parties. Upon entering office in June 2024, I found an outstanding balance to one of our creditors, one of our vendors, a loan outstanding since 2020, 580,000 guilders. That's
Minister,
one. Yep.
excuse me, I see that MP York had a comment.
Mm-hmm. It was rhetorical, Mr. Chairman. That's why I say it was
the
rhetorical,
question
and there's no need to actually answer it.
Don't ask the question.
Point. Rhetorical.
Minister, please proceed.
Thank you very
with
much.
your
That's the definition of rhetorical.
presentation.
So with that, 580,000 guilders was found outstanding to one vendor from 2020. That's one of the many vendors that VROMI has to work with. Now, imagine we have about 3 to 5 main vendors for things like roads. With a 600,000 guilder budget and almost 4 years of outstanding payments, our credibility to those vendors are gone. Unless we finalize those payments, vendors are not willing to do emergency interventions to fix infrastructure. So unfortunately, the years of unpaid bills has not only been an issue for VROMI, but for this government as a whole. I can tell you, education, the Ministry of AZ, the Ministry of TEAT have spent the last 2 years actually rectifying credibility of government to its vendors. As such, the budget that I have allocated, 600,000 guilders for roads, is actually now being spent to pay all bills. So when you ask why there's no urgency in infrastructure interventions, it's because we just can't do it unless we regain the credibility from our vendors. In addition, an intervention at Ebenezer, which costs the taxpayers 530,000 euros, 1.1 million guilders, stems from inaction of over 20 years regarding erosion and building practices in the hillside. In particular, I'm in possession of about 3 letters issued to the former administration indicating concerns of erosion in the hillside in Ebenezer, to which no intervention was done. Mr. Chairman, with that, as you can imagine, with any snowball, the bigger the problem, the longer the problem is unaddressed and allowed to roll down the hill, the bigger the problem becomes. As such, in the same 600,000 guilders for roads and another million or so for erosion and stormwater, I've had to pay 1.1 million of that money for long-standing, unanswered interventions on infrastructure. So while many sit here preparing a little sound bites for popularity, the reality is interventions will always go slow if we don't do proper financial management and we don't make proper investments in our infrastructure. On the topic of garbage, I am very surprised when I come often to Parliament, and this is a topic of discussion regarding garbage. And you know, it's one of the things that I've spoken about on several interventions. And actually, my dear friend MP York actually gave me called me, you know, at some points being petty for bringing forth facts. And the reality is, the facts of why we are here currently with garbage is nestled very well in the past, in history. The Ombudsman's report. Mr. Chairman, the issue of why we're here today is clearly defined in the Ombudsman report as the following: interference. Interference by the cabinet of the then minister. The placing of vendors who were disqualified, I repeat, disqualified from the tender and personally put back in by the cabinet of the then minister. Garbage didn't start with me. In fact, the state of garbage was a critical campaign agenda in the election of January 2024. So imagine, to my surprise, when I came to office in June 2024 and found nothing. No records of complaints, no information about reports about lack of garbage coordination, nothing. What that meant is, when I came in, all the 4 years of these garbage contracts had no data and no information on which to make a decision about how to move forward with garbage. What I did when I came in is held meetings with all the haulers. We've actually held about 4 or 5 meetings in the whole entire time of the first year to address these exact same challenges and build cases to, one, support where possible, and address concerns and complaints of the population also where possible. In fact, when we actually tried and we built a first case to dismiss a vendor, we were actually taken to court, and the court found our grounds completely fair. Now, as it relates to the ongoing bidding process, I wish to reiterate, because I've heard some very interesting comments coming out of this floor regarding the shame and humiliation of the tender failing by this current minister. I want to reiterate to the members of Parliament, through you, Mr. Chair, and the listening audience, and those viewing as well, the tender failing is a complete accident of the people who tendered. As I stated before in press briefing, the issue started solely from the fact that there was not a following of procedures and a failure of the tour as a whole in terms of how they followed the terms of reference. So any allegations and any attempts to paint it as a mistake by the government or the minister as a whole is very unfortunate. And I think it again speaks to the truth that the issues around garbage has nothing to do with what is going on now. Under my mandate, we go read the Ombudsman report as I stated, and with that, we can come to the conclusion that this is nothing new at all. Finally, Mr. Chairman, when it relates to the questions outstanding and the statement made by the MP regarding me blaming Parliament for the meetings, I never blamed Parliament. As you recall, in the meeting we had here just 2 months ago, I indicated the following. There's a manner in which meetings are called within the House of Parliament. I highly suggest, if not known to all MPs, that they review it, because the statements being made, it's as if it is the minister who's not coming to meetings. In fact, the first time we started planning these meetings was the end of last year, beginning of this year. So meetings that were only called in November, October. And then finally, of course, the questions regarding the garbage meeting, that request may have come before the meeting, but I actually received that notification on the day of announcement of the tender. So I'm awaiting the confirmation of that time with the Secretariat and my own staff. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my notifications. And I'm very happy to finally come to Parliament to present this housing policy, recognizing, of course, that this was a meeting requested in January. But as I stated on several occasions, if the policy is not complete, there can be no presentation of a policy.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Minister, for your answers on the notifications. I would like to give the MPs a chance to reply on the Minister's answer to notifications because it was very lengthy, and also would like to remind the public that indeed there is a meeting pending, a public meeting pending in regards to the garbage contract tendering, and we look forward to planning that as well. MPs, I see that some of you had some comments on the notification answers by the Minister. I see MP York was first. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seemingly the Minister had some things to get off his chest. But I'll start by going down the line. I don't know, it's not chronological, but there were some things that I feel needs to be clarified. The last statement made by the Minister, Mr. Chairman, about meetings and procedures of meetings, Mr. Chairman, we don't got to go back and forth on these things. At the end of the day, you can say what you want about a meeting, but when letters with questions are sent and not answered, and the letters are pending for a year and a half to a year to 6 months, that has nothing to do with the meeting process or anything. That's just negligence. At the end of the day, an email doesn't go through Parliament. An email also goes directly to the Minister's cabinet. There are several emails with questions and queries that haven't been answered by the Minister or his cabinet. So at the end of the day, we could keep forcing and pointing at meetings and trying to blame processes and all type of things, but every single method of communication sent to the Minister via this House or via members of this House has been ignored. That's for the record. At least I can't speak on everybody else, but from this faction, right? Next thing, the last two things, Mr. Chairman, in the Minister's recollection of the state of affairs of infrastructure and the history of it on our island, all I heard were complaints and basically looking at all the things that were already there before him coming in and nothing about what he did about it since being in. At the end of the day, he's in the seat now, and the prior government could have pointed fingers at the prior government, and the prior government before that could have pointed fingers at the prior government, because one thing is certain, Mr. Chairman, every single ministry for decades has outstanding bills. That's nothing unique, and that's nothing of yesterday. Every single, as a matter of fact, one would even say the government runs on debt. That's a known issue. That was known even before the minister took office. So to use that now as excuse to why a repair on the road was not made that may have led, I use my words wisely, may have led to a serious accident is playing out ignorance, Mr. Chairman, and one of the reasons what is wrong with our country today and why things are not getting done. Because people are hiding behind excuses and not focusing on the solutions and what can be done tangibly to fix a solution. Mr. Chairman, right now, that same issue is still a problem right now. There has still been no emergency intervention, none of the sort. And the minister asked the question if we know, anybody of Parliament knows how much it costs to fix a road. Mr. Chairman, I think I'm uniquely qualified to answer that question, seeing that I used to fix the roads on behalf of a particular company. And Mr. Chairman, with serious interventions such as what is on the Second Garden Road, something can always be done about it. So at the end of the day, and for the minister to say that there was no, because I read somewhere that the minister also alluded to it, that years of neglect to our infrastructure network, the biggest projects when it comes to infrastructure in the last decade were done recently, just before the minister took office. The Bush Road, the Union Road, the minister even walked into a warm bath, and he was able to do the Point Blanche Road, side roads. So don't sit and act as if there was no money to do anything. As a matter of fact, Mr. Chairman, the minister took $10 million and bought land. Great. But if you're going to sit here and say that there were no emergency priorities needed before that, before you made that choice, such as fixing roads, that's a decision that was taken for whatever reason, way, shape, form, or fashion. But do not sit here come here, especially after what happened not even 2 days ago, and say the reason the road wasn't fixed is because I had no money. Because at the end of the day, we didn't find no excuse, COM didn't find no excuses for Soul Beach. They found the money, unconventional ways. So the minister should have found unconventional ways to fix that road. And not even the road. It's not 60 meters, it's not 80 meters, it's not 100 meters. Mr. Chairman, it's 3 by 3, not even 10 square meters. The worst part of the road. Okay? That doesn't take 600,000 to fix. And at the end of the day, if this COM can find 1.6 million to pump into a choice in the marketplace, in extra funds, why can't they find the money to fix a road that's hazardous and dangerous? Why can't they find the money to put toilet paper in the schools? Why can't they find the money to pay for our athletes to go away? At the end of the day, the minister is going to say outstanding bills again. And I know I'm going over my time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience. But, Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, I find we have come to a point in this governing term that I am sick and tired of any minister using excuses of the former government. Because that seems to be, I can't even call it a remix, that seems to be a go-to when they have no answers. And I am sick, and I think the people, Mr. Chairman, are sick of it as well. Because when people are getting hurt out there, and for the minister to say, and everybody know what happens, what happened, for the minister to give an ignorant statement like what he put out yesterday about leave the investigation, take its course, Mr. Chairman, that won't age well. I can tell you from now. So if we're sitting down and looking for empathy and excuses on why inaction happened or didn't happen, we got to show the same empathy to the people that right now are laying in bed, injured, because of inaction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP York, for your comments on the minister's answers for the notifications. I see that MP Arian also would like to comment. MP Arian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I realized that the minister today was actually prepared for the wrong meeting. Because today the meeting was supposed to be about housing policy, but the minister actually came to talk about the garbage meeting that we actually called already. And I tend to disagree with my former colleague on one point, mentioning that he doesn't like when ministers keep on mentioning the prior government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I actually like when they do that, because according to what they say in public, they ain't ready, right? This minister that mentioned that MP could be petty, I think his fashion of responding to the notifications was petty, but the minister actually worked for government in the past. The minister understands what the government budget was. He knows what was in the budget of the Ministry of VROMI before he decided to be a Minister of VROMI. So maybe MP D.J. was right. She should have been a Minister of VROMI, because she probably wouldn't have complained and maybe would have found the money to fix the roads if you're going to be petty. And like my colleague MP just mentioned, again, you made that decision to be a minister. The complaints, you knew what you was getting yourself into. You decided in the Council of Ministers to approve a budget to bring to Parliament where your coalition approves. So you can't sit down here and complain about no budget, because you brought the budget to Parliament. Your coalition members supported it. So don't complain about no budget, because that's what you wanted. It wasn't true, Mr. Chairman. We didn't want that. I didn't support it. So you approve 600,000 guilders. So stop complaining about it and fix the roads with it then. Secondly, the CAPEX was there. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the minister decided he's going to change the CAPEX, ain't got no drainage, he ain't going to do that. There's no budget amendment to CAPEX. The Ministry of VROMI could have done that. The minister could have amended the CAPEX, and the minister could have said, I will not allocate this money to put towards the roads. It's in the minister's hand. So again, yes, the full blame is on the current minister right now sitting in front of us, and the Council of Ministers, and the coalition that supported the budget that doesn't have enough money for the roads. In terms of, yeah, so I would, again, I disagree with my former MP. I want them to continue complaining, MP. It just shows more and more and more they ain't ready. Secondly, regarding the garbage, again, more excuses. So you're trying to tell me in the history of Sint Maarten, not one single hauler did it right. So all of a sudden now, all these garbage haulers just don't know what they're doing no more. always in place who basically started picking up garbage in St. Maarten, they all of a sudden now do not understand. The same always in place that is your chief of staff. They don't know now how to apply to a procurement process. Good, good. And now I like even more that we have the chair of this committee now, that since 2022, your party, PFT party, has spoken about procurement policy, procurement law, hasn't supported budgets in the past because it was not done. You are there for 2 years. Matter of fact, we left the procurement policy in government, done now by the current Minister of Justice, Natty Tacklin, right? And what you guys do, throw it out because her policy wasn't good enough. Her legal procurement policy wasn't good enough. I understood that the chairman also proposed something. I guess his own isn't good enough either. So maybe that's why they failed, because the things that you campaigned on, the procurement policy, one of the things that you mentioned in the same ombudsman reports, you're not doing yourself either. You haven't done either. So you have failed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Arian. I would like to also remind the MPs and the Minister of the topic of today's meeting. I see that MP La Cruz also wants to comment on the notifications. I'll give MP La Cruz the floor, and then MP Roseberg, and then we will try to proceed to agenda point 1. MP La Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the Minister of VROMI for giving me an extra question to ask during budget, which is simple. Which bills did the Minister of TAT find when she got in there? And when were these bills created? Because I can't remember at no time the ministry creating any bills that were outside of the budget. And I would actually like to hear that from every ministry, because that would be nice to see. So thank you for the question, Minister. The ministry will appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would like to bring forward through you to the Minister of VROMI and his support staff, we as Parliament, as we all know, have a role to do and a job to do, and there are procedures that need to be followed. Once letters are being sent, if there is no answer to be given, at least answer that we're working on it. At least answer that it's something that we're busy with, because at the end, and I'm here speaking as a member of Parliament, no coalition, no opposition, it's just the job that we all have. And then we as well can provide a response on behalf of the people who put us here, that the ministry is working on it, that will avoid unnecessary confusion. That's one, through you, Mr. Chair. So I hope the ministry will take this advice serious, because at the end, non-response will live his own world and will have his own assumptions. And I believe assumptions is not what we need. Other than that, I'm not a specialist in regards to infrastructure, and I will not make myself a specialist either. I believe there are enough specialists in that field, but we all know that we have an infrastructure issue. We all know that currently the road in Soccer Garden is an issue. So therefore, we need to be creative, and I'm talking in we because it's a us responsibility. We need to be creative, and at this moment, and I want to know, seeing that through you, Mr. Chair, the minister mentioned that apparently at this moment, seeing whatever reasons, I'm leave that in the middle, there is no trust at this moment by the vendors or the ones that need to fix this issue, and seeing that there are financial constraints in regards to that. So therefore, I would like to ask, and I would like to use this floor as the possibility to ask those vendors that can, at this moment, assist in this urgent situations, with all consequences van dien, to assist in this temporary fix. I have seen in the past that when there was an issue on Colbay Hill, there was a plate that was put. I heard my colleague First speaker, MP York, mentioned that it's a small oppervlakte. As I said, it's not my specialism. So if a plate can be placed and if that can be done out of the bottom of that organization's heart with the focus on the ministry having the focus on making sure that future endeavors will take place in the correct way, that we can temporarily fix this issue because it can have severe consequences and that would be unfortunate. So I'm not looking here to place any blame on anyone. I'm just asking as a member of parliament to those that have the specialism and that have the opportunity to provide that plate of steel or whatever that is needed to, at this moment, temporarily stop the dangerous situation until structured measures are in place, that can be done, because it would be unfortunate if further accidents happen. And also, if some kind of board can be placed, be aware, make sure to drive slowly, and also to the public itself, please pay attention until this is fixed, even if it's temporarily, how you drive, scooter drivers as well. Because at the end, it is what it is right now, and until there's a solution, we need to have, be cautious about it. So that's my contribution in regards to the responses given. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roseberg, and I also concur a temporary solution would be helpful in the meantime until we get something permanent. I would like to now move on to the agenda point in regards to the housing policy, and I look at the minister to see if he's ready to give his presentation. Minister, you have the floor.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, agree, we move on to the agenda point number 1. But let me just comfort MP Roseberg via you regarding where we are with the update on the road. Indeed, we are actually in the finalization phases. So as I stated publicly, we have been actually proactively working on this road. There's a process within which government has to follow. And the reality is, I spoke about the fact that we have to pay creditors. They've been paid. This is one of the things I'm speaking about the limited budget. So just to be clear, we are in the finalization phases of awarding the works to be done. It will be finalized. And I also indicated that while things seem to be going slow, there is a process in government. And when you have a creditor issue, unfortunately, emergency interventions don't always work. So this is a challenge we have with doing emergency interventions over the last couple of months. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn to the agenda point number 1. And thank you again for today. So we move now to Housing Policy Sint Maarten 2026. The goal of this policy is adequate housing for all Sint Maarteners in all stages of their life, aligning very well with SDG number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. And according to the UN, of course, adequate housing is a human right and is not a commodity. Everyone that resides in Sint Maarten is part of society and should have access to good housing and a good living environment. Why a housing policy? Based on the principles of Building Back Better and through the Trust Fund financed by the Netherlands, the government of Sint Maarten, via the National Recovery Program Bureau, NRPB, launched a dedicated housing project. This project, with an allocation of $20 million, aimed to strengthen institutional capacity, support the development of a comprehensive housing policy, and deliver new social housing for low-income households. This project was terminated April 2024. Out of this project, the housing policy remained. In 2024, VROMI, through NRPB, recruited a project manager to draft the housing policy, which was finalized late 2025. The policy aims to address the long-standing challenges in the housing sector, particularly the shortage of affordable and social housing. For many years, there has been a lack of affordable housing on Sint Maarten. The passing of the devastating hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017 destroyed many homes on the island, and studies in 2019 listed the long waiting list for social housing and indicated shortcoming in the institutional framework and organizational capacity for social housing. Starting point. Census 2022 data. The population at that time shows that Sint Maarten had a population of approximately 41 to 42,000 people. And this number continues to grow. At the same time, our population is also aging, which means the type of housing we need is changing. Another important trend is that the households are becoming smaller, from an average of 4.3 persons per household in 1977 to just 2.1 in 2022. This means that even if the population growth is moderate, the demand for housing is increasing significantly, as more and smaller households require more housing units. These trends underline the urgency for a structured housing policy that responds to both current and future needs. This policy development included several stakeholders that were engaged over time. These include different ministries, VSA, TEAT, and Finance, banks, ORCO, Central Bank, and WIB, and RPB. The policy was funded through the Trust Fund, NGOs, SMHDF, Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation, of course, and Nature Foundation, and institutions, the Rental Tribunal, and the Cadastre. And of course, we also include the Collectivité of Sint Maarten. Let's look at data, legislation, and previous reports that were analyzed. In developing this policy, one of the key challenges identified is the lack of consistent, up-to-date, and reliable data. For example, earlier estimates such as the Building Book from 2012 assumed a population of around 65,000, while official data from the Stat Office shows that as of January 2024, the population is just over 41,000. This kind of discrepancy significantly affects how we plan for housing needs and investments. At the same time, census data confirms that household sizes have decreased to an average of 2.1 persons per household, which increases overall housing demand. Another key issue identified is that our current legal framework for housing is outdated, incomplete, or not yet formalized. For example, the Building Ordinance and Building Code date back to 1935. Zoning plans are not fully formalized, and there's currently no social housing ordinance in place. This means that government lacks the necessary legal instruments to effectively guide development, regulate the housing market, and ensure adequate housing quality. As a result, housing development has been largely uncoordinated and difficult to control. Over the past 25 years, various studies have been conducted on the housing market of Sint Maarten. The first housing vision for Sint Maarten was delivered in 2003. Thereafter came an updated version in 2012. In 2016, a draft housing strategy was made, and in 2019, not long after Hurricane Irma, the World Bank Group did a rapid housing sector assessment. These documents all provide relevant information and recommendations for housing on Sint Maarten. All of them emphasize the need for more affordable housing. However, we can conclude that there has been limited practical implementation of these proposed actions and measures. The problems that were identified in the first vision 23 years ago still exist. There is still a need for affordable and social housing, and trends such as aging and brain drain have also continued. Therefore, various recommendations that are still relevant were reintroduced into its updated policy. In previous housing reports, the actions and measures were mainly proposed to the government and the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation. But the reality is that self-builders and small developers have been the most important producers of housing for Sint Maarteners in the last decades. This also means that this policy makes a shift and emphasizes the role of the private sector and in the housing value chain, the construction sector, developers, banks, etc. In the housing policy, the government has to define and monitor the rules, facilitate, and bring people together. The policy. A key objective of this policy is to bring clarity and structure to the housing sector. For the first time, we clearly define what we mean by different types of housing, including low-cost, affordable, and social housing, as well as who qualifies for each category. This is essential to ensure that support reaches the right groups and that there is transparency in how housing is developed and allocated. In addition, the policy sets out concrete actions and implementation framework to guide how we increase housing supply and improve affordability in a coordinated and effective way. Without clear definitions and structure, we cannot effectively address the housing challenges we face. As a general benchmark, households should spend no more than 25 to 30% of their disposable income on housing in order for it to remain affordable. Based on this principle, the policy defines different housing categories. Low-cost housing is aimed at households earning minimum wage, where monthly housing costs should not exceed approximately 324 guilders. That's an error in the slide. Affordable housing is targeted at middle-income households, with the maximum monthly cost of around 900 guilders. Note that the median is the income in the middle, meaning half of the people earn less and half earn more. We use median income because it gives a more accurate picture of what most people earn, as it is not distorted by a very high or very low incomes. Overall, these definitions ensure that housing remains within reach for different income groups and provide a clear framework for both policy and development. What's really critical here as well is to notice that at first value, we see that these numbers don't very accurately, appropriately align with what the market provides. And of course, we are having discussions internally with the relevant ministries on how we can address this as well. Key aspects. The policy takes a broad and integrated approach to housing. Housing is not a standalone issue. It is closely linked to who we are building for, where we build, and how we regulate and support the sector. It addresses the needs of specific target groups, including young professionals, key workers, and the elderly. What is a key worker? A key worker is a worker that has a job regarded as vital for the community, especially in the health, education, security, and infrastructure sectors. Key workers are healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, caregivers, teachers and education staff, police, firefighters, emergency service providers, public sector employees, example, essential government roles, tourism and hospitality workers, given Sint Maarten economic model. Social housing. As a large part of our population is in need of social housing, I would like to allude on this housing type a bit more. Social housing refers to housing that is provided primarily by public or non-profit organizations to households who qualify at reduced rental rates. In these cases, government supports affordability by covering part of the housing costs. At present, the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation is the only provider maintaining 769 rental units, of which 636 are classified as social housing. When we look at the total housing stock of approximately 20,000 homes, this means that only about 3% is currently social housing. However, the data shows that at least 25% of our population is eligible for this type of housing. 25.5% of households have an income, 1,650 guilders or less, that falls below the European poverty threshold. This clearly highlights a significant gap and underscores the urgent need to expand social housing provisions. Housing program. The policy sets clear minimum targets for housing development over the next 10 years. We aim to deliver at least 1,200 homes, which comes down to approximately 120 homes per year. A key priority is social housing, with a minimum of 400 units, of which at least half will be allocated to vulnerable groups, such as the elderly and persons with disabilities. In addition, We aim to develop at least 500 affordable homes to support middle-income households. The remaining share, up to 300 homes, will be in the free market segment. This balanced approach ensures that we address the needs of vulnerable groups, support the middle class, and maintain a functioning housing market. What's really critical to recall over this is that this does not mean in of itself government is building 1,200 homes. Government, in collaboration with the private sector and other stakeholders, will have 1,200 homes as a goal. Housing program. The target is at least 70%, approximately 850 homes the building program, is achieved by the following mechanisms: reuse of existing buildings, that's vacant properties, Airbnb former units, densification of residential areas, plot splitting, backyard rentals, multifamily use, development of apartment buildings, more homes on limited land, alternative housing models, townhouses, semi-detached housing, and housing transformation projects. These approaches allow us to increase housing supply without relying solely on new land development. Housing transformation projects. Find new financing models. As financial products like rent-to-buy in Curaçao, they have a concept called Mikasa Ao, and employers that offer mortgage assistance, i.e. acting as guarantor. The ministry is also currently reviewing existing structures as a mechanism to support future housing needs. There's also a proposal forthcoming on the potential of land tax on foreign persons and non-natural entities on properties to support future housing needs. Stronger collaboration across sectors. The idea is that the government looks for new collaborations with non-traditional stakeholders. Traditionally, the government works together with SMHDF. You can see that in the old policies. But to reach the goals of this policy, the government can also work together with private parties. First of all, developers. But for instance, for the student campuses, the government has to work together with the university or the White and Yellow Cross Foundation. They have the possibility to build social housing for elderly, financed by the government, or maybe hotels that may provide housing for their own staff. So the idea is to think of other kind of partnerships to achieve the goal, i.e. more affordable and suitable housing. Roles and responsibilities. This is a very critical slide. It is very important to emphasize that the government cannot solve the housing challenge alone. The policy is aimed not only at government, but defines the roles and responsibilities of different actors, stakeholders that collectively contribute to improving our housing sector. From the side of government, define policy and legislation, that's from VROMI. Government allocate funding, finance, provide data and monitoring, TEAT, define social needs, VSA, and of course enable land and zoning, VROMI. From the market, private sector, develop housing projects, provide financing, this is the banks, innovative construction methods, and increase housing supply. Institutions of society, of course, identify the needs of vulnerable groups, provide care and social support, and finally, support community development. And once again, indicating government cannot solve the housing challenge alone. This policy mobilizes all actors. Implementation. These are the priorities brought forward by the policy. It is very important to state that although these are the priorities, prerequisites to carry these priorities are technical and financial capacity. Ensuring housing knowledge capacity within VROMI. VROMI's formation plans are already tight. However, we do have a vacancy for senior policy advisor to be filled. And hopefully by 2027, one more vacancy for another policy advisor will open up. 2, set up housing market monitoring system. This is aimed at our permits department in collaboration with TEAT to collect more data on housing types. For instance, standalone houses, apartments, complexes, condos, hotels, including number of bathrooms, social facilities, business, office buildings, etc. Price ranges, location, size, density, and building heights, etc. Implement the updated building code. This is well underway. We have just started this project back up again and aim to finalize it before the end of this year. Develop land issuance policy. This project has also started. 5, facilitate a housing market transformation project. This is to be discussed internally, specifically what price we can execute first. The revamping of the mortgage guarantee fund is being worked on. 6, and finally, implement social housing regulations in a housing ordinance. This is needed and will be evaluated as a phase 2 intervention to this project. This also takes into consideration the additional legal capacity that will be needed for this. Some quick wins. These actions can be initiated immediately and deliver visible results within the first year. Land purchase in Belvedere. This space is reserved for balanced residential communities consisting of affordable housing. 2, accelerate social and affordable housing projects. In partnership with the Housing Development Foundation, identify joint quick wins such as social housing projects that VROMI and the Foundation can accelerate by facilitating land and accelerating permitting. 3, engage the local market to deliver affordable housing projects and our housing finance products to developers. SMHDF, local finance institutions, banks, pension funds, etc. can accelerate with relevant support from government. And finally, engage with international stakeholders, including the Netherlands, to identify affordable housing projects or housing finance products that developers, material suppliers, international finance institutions can accelerate with relevant support from government. And of course, lower the barrier to home ownership, discussion around the reduction of notary costs, and improving financing tools. Tools to support housing. Technical. VROMI has developed and is developing concrete tools to support the housing sector. The Mortgage Guarantee Fund. Originally established in 2000, since dormant, a committee was formed this year following several months of advanced work to reestablish the committee. A ministerial decree has been drafted, giving the committee powers to administratively overhaul the Articles of Incorporation, explore funding mechanisms both with financial and non-financial institutions, and advising on eligibility criteria. Professionalization of the Housing Development Foundation Board. In consultation with the current board, the ministry took the decision to establish profiles for the board. Despite this being Articles of Incorporation, no profiles were ever created, and the board didn't always align with recommended categories. The creation of these profiles aligns with good corporate governance, helping to ensure decisions support foundation and the clients it serves. And finally, land acquisition. Purchase of Belvedere Remainder brings additional assets for development of housing needs. This will be developed in line with the housing policy and other applicable policies and initiatives which are outlined in the following slide. Tools to support housing from a more global point of view. VROMI has also developed the Climate Impact Atlas, aimed to support more climate-resilient building. The CIA also includes a climate adaptation options database, which describes concrete adaptation options that VROMI and developers can use to advise and use in building projects to make them more climate resilient. National Adaptation Strategy, aimed at strengthening the national climate resilience of Sint Maarten. Draft Zoning and Building Code includes binding regulations on housing, density, heights, land use restrictions, etc. On the Building Code, announced in 2023, but the ministry didn't have the legal capacity to execute. We have since, via the TWO, hired a legal to finalize the process. The realization of the new code will require a ministerial decree and an amendment decree. The timeline for this is 6 months and will include retraining on the new building code. With that, Mr. Chairman, we've come to the end of the presentation. I look forward to the questions from the members of Parliament.
Thank you, Minister, for your presentation on the housing policy. I look now to the floor and see, and I'm looking at which members I can give the floor to for any questions on agenda point 1. I see MP York. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's agenda point 1 was a quite broad topic, a broad agenda point. There are some things that were mentioned now and during this meeting and in prior articles from the minister that I think the public would like to have, the public does want clarity on. In the minister's housing plan, which I didn't see really reflected in this presentation. The minister speaks on 1,200 homes, 400 social, 500 affordable, 300 free market units, 50% of the social housing to go out to the elderly, most vulnerable populations, etc. But in this presentation, the minister speaks on a zoning plan which enables densification and ensuring sustainability, etc., the building code, the national climate adaptation strategy, the climate impact atlas, several things that are still to be developed are in development. So it makes me wonder, how did the minister get to these precise numbers? Was it a projection? Was it a plan? Because that was not clear in the presentation. As well, because if these things are still to be done, how can these numbers be determined? As well, Minister, through Mr. Chairman, the good thing is today is the fact that you made it to the meeting. The bad thing is it took a year. Fair enough to say that the questions have piled up. So I hope we have some time today. On the topic of the 1,200 homes, can the Minister via you, Mr. Chairman, confirm whether a comprehensive master plan has been finalized for the development of these homes? What is the projected population density resulting from this development, or how does this compare to the current carrying capacity of Belvedere and the surrounding districts? Has a capacity assessment been conducted on existing infrastructure, roads, drainage, sewage, utilities to determine whether it can support this expansion? What impact will the addition of these 1,200 homes have on the existing road network, particularly in Dutch Quarter and Belvedere area and access to routes to Philipsburg? Are the plans to upgrade or expand the road infrastructure, including secondary access roads, to accommodate the increased traffic flow? Has a traffic impact study been conducted, and if so, will the results be made public and shared with Parliament? Has a hydraulical and stormwater drainage study been conducted for Belvedere Annex, Belvedere development area, or to be planned? How will surface runoff from the development be managed to prevent flooding in the downstream areas, particularly towards the Friends side or the surrounding neighborhoods? Because putting in infrastructure and housing takes away from the capacities to absorb the water into the earth. So what is the plans for that runoff? Are there plans to implement retention ponds, culverts, and sustainable drainage systems as part of the development? And how will the government ensure that this development will not put an extra burden on the existing infrastructure, being drainage challenges during heavy rain events? And lastly, for this set of questions, what is the current capacity of the sewage and wastewater treatment system in the Belvedere area, and can it accommodate the additional load of 1,200 homes? As it pertains to the housing policy itself, can the Minister provide a detailed implementation plan outlining timelines, milestones, and responsible entities for delivering these 1,200 units? What is the annual housing delivery target? Because I saw in the Minister's article, he speaks on 40 annually, 50 annually, 30 annually. Seeing that was December, are these numbers still accurate? If not, can the Minister give the more accurate, updated numbers? Has a phased execution strategy been developed? And if so, what are the priority districts and areas? What is the total estimated budget required to implement this housing policy between 2025 and 2035? What funding sources have been secured? Has the government conducted a cost per unit analysis for social, affordable, and free market housing? What financial safeguards are in place to ensure the affordability in the long term, especially for middle income earners? Because the mention of a mortgage guarantee fund simultaneously with affordable housing, what defines affordable? So what mechanisms are in place, are going to be put in place to define affordable and safeguard that number which is affordable? Because as the minister already knows, a livable wage is something that, especially this government, campaigned on. If we're going to do a mortgage guarantee fund, which is going to guarantee mortgages up to a particular point for these particular houses in particular, what will happen if safeguards are not put in place on time to safeguard what is deemed affordable? Inflation will happen. So if the mortgage guarantee fund is slated to be instated, I would assume as well that the living wage will be put in before that. So I would like to know what safeguards are in place, are going to be put in place to secure what is deemed affordable. Also, Mr. Chairman, when we speak on housing, the minister spoke on everything that is new, but not what is current. There are several emergency homes on the island which are being used, and pertaining to that, I didn't see in the minister's presentation what the plans are with these emergency homes. So can the minister confirm the total number of emergency homes constructed after Hurricane Lewis in Union Farm, Foga, Cold Bay, South Reward, Sucker Garden, and specify their current management status under the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation? What formal agreements exist between the government and the foundation regarding the management, maintenance, upkeep, and administration of these emergency homes? Was the original intention of the government and subsequently the foundation, Sint Maarten Development Housing Foundation, that these homes would remain temporary, or have they effectively transitioned into permanent housing over the last 30 years? How does the Housing Foundation currently classify occupants of these homes as tenants, beneficiaries, or owners for the future? What is the minister's vision in collaboration with the Housing Foundation for long-term future for these emergency projects? And is the government, together with the Housing Foundation, considering a program to sell or transfer ownership of these homes and or the underlying land to the current occupants? As it pertains to the Sint Maarten Housing Foundation, which was mentioned in the minister's presentation as well, what current short, mid, and long-term vision, what's the current short, mid-term, and long-term vision of the Housing Foundation regarding the expansion and modernization of social and affordable housing on Sint Maarten? Can the minister provide a detailed overview of all planned or ongoing housing development projects under the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation for the next 3 to 10 years? What is the total outstanding loan portfolio of the foundation with local and our international financial institutions? And Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it at that. For now, I have many more questions, but I'll just await the answers from the minister pertaining to these first. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. Just a side note, we did also receive a notice of absence from MP Ludmila de Weaver. I just wanted to put that on record. The next MP to speak is MP Christopher Weaver. MP Weaver, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the Griffier, Honorable Minister, support staff, my honorable colleagues here today, those viewing and listening via whichever media. Thank you, Minister, first of all, for the presentation. I think it was informative. And when we're discussing also the housing, I think the previous MP mentioned some key aspects with the Housing Foundation. And I want to once again also state that when I was Minister of VROMI, I had discussion with the Sint Maarten Housing Foundation where we discussed 2 areas for housing, which was the Foga and the one in South Reward. And at that time, the Housing Foundation also was in agreement that we will be able to turn it over to those that are living there. So instead of them, that they can actually own the homes For one, it alleviated some of the financial burden for the housing foundation, that they would have to make the repairs and all that stuff. And then at least the people living there now would have the opportunity to get a mortgage, be able to, then to upgrade their homes as well. So maybe that's something that Minister, through you, Mr. Chairman, can still look into. And maybe that's a possibility to ensure instant home ownership, I think, in a short period of time. And then I like the 1,200 homes in 10 years, 120 homes per year. How will this be done? Also with the constraints within the permit department, because sometimes, and just today I got a message with a person asking about permits, and they're waiting 2 years already now for just an extension built on to that. So now to get 120 permits out in less than a year to be able to build the home in a year. How will that be done? Is there a plan in place? But then also, besides the 120, to be able then to also accommodate those living here that's besides that want to apply for a permit. So, yeah, so that's my questions for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Weaver, for your questions. I now look at the speakers list. MP Veronica Janssen-Webster, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to the Minister. Welcome, and welcome to his support staff. I have a few questions. The Minister mentioned, for instance, that government cannot solve the housing project alone. My question is VROMI open to public-private partnerships with housing developers, and will VROMI then pledge to prioritize the building permits, just as my colleague mentioned before, with the way how long it takes with building permits. If a private developer would like to work with government on developing social homes, it might take them 2 years as well. So is government willing to prioritize the building permits and work together with private developers to help solve the issue? I have another question about how many people are actually on the waiting list now. I know there have been rumors of 7,000 families. Is it 7,000? Is it 700? How many people, how many households are on the waiting list now as we speak? And will the new housing be administered by the same Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation that is administering the houses now? And are all board member positions filled in the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation? There was an ad recently for a new director for the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation, and has a new director been appointed, and have they already started working? And so these new houses will be built, hopefully 120 per year. Who will determine who gets one of these new houses? There are people who have been on a list for quite some time. Is it so that we will go down that list, that existing list, and chronologically the people who were there before will get the houses? How will this be done? Who will be, which entity, or is it a new entity is coming, or a new group or task force? Who will be determining who will get these new houses as they come off the block, let's say, as they are developed? When the minister mentioned that they are working also on the land issuance policy, my question then is, when does the minister expect that the land issuance policy will be ready? And also for that land issuance, there are many people have been waiting, have been on lists waiting for years. And the question there too is, should they resubmit? Same thing like with the housing, the people who have been on the list for housing. Give people the best advice. What's the best thing people should do right now, whether you want one of these houses, or you want a piece of land from government that would be available with a land issuance, tell us in kitchen table language, what should this person do to get to, in Nederlands, kom in aanmerking, to get one of these houses? Should they resubmit? Is there a form somewhere? Is there somewhere that they can go? And how will you, Minister, through you, Mr. Chairman, how will you, Minister, ensure that people and individuals and households will be treated fairly in they wrote in that day, they qualified based on whatever specifications before another person, and they qualify then for that house, and that they get it before other people who came maybe after them or came the day before the keys were handed out. And it's something that I'm sure was in the World Bank report as well. It's a mistrust in the community where people feel like even though they wrote in a long time ago, they never get a house. Why do they never get a house? I can even tell you that there are some people who feel like certain people are discriminated in getting houses as it is right now. And if you look around Sint Maarten and see the different compositions of people that we have, and if you look in the areas where we have social housing or government housing, you will see that there are certain groups that are missing. So it looks that way, but a study has to be done to see what is the background of all of those people so that you could determine, okay, there are certain groups that are really missing from there, who might also have Dutch passports but do not qualify for some reason for certain houses. So how will you, Minister, ensure that the allocation of the houses will be done in a transparent and fair manner? Then questions about the current housing. Some tenants have been complaining about repairs that are lagging, repairs that have not been done, how long it takes for repairs, what is being done concretely. Is there a plan to have all the outstanding repairs done by a certain time? And also not only repairs of the homes, but cleaning and clearing of the open lots and the areas around the houses, clearing of garbage that's dumped around the houses, which could lead to vermin infestations and other uncomfortable situations. So those are my questions. I applaud the minister for coming out with a housing plan, but I want to caution the minister, we have a lot of homes already that also need taking care of. And with building new homes, another question that I just thought up, is a maintenance plan coming with the building of the new homes, so we don't end up with homes that are, again, not being maintained? Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Johnson-Webster. I look at the list, I see that MP York has a comment again. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, today I have a lot of comments. There's one thing that I would like to pose now before the minister answers any questions. The housing policy that we're discussing today, and that the minister has made a presentation briefly about and has been mentioning since December. In an article from the minister dated December 10th, the minister stated that the housing policy will be submitted to Parliament at the end of the first quarter of 2026. That's this week, next week. So I would like to know if that will be seen. We didn't get to peruse the policy prior to this meeting to have a tangible discussion, a real in-depth discussion about the policy itself. Is the policy ready? Secondly, and if it's ready, when can Parliament expect it, seeing that the minister told the public it will be submitted to Parliament at the end of the first quarter of 2026? Because only then can we really have a conversation of what is to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP York. I see that MP Arian is next. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So MP York just answered one of my questions because I was wondering if we're discussing a draft policy or a published policy, and based on the question posed just now, I'm assuming we're discussing a draft policy. It would have been nice, though, to still have the draft policy in Parliament with us. So my question to the chair, do we have this draft policy, Mr. Chairman? Because we have a presentation based on what are we discussing? Because only the presentation, or do we have the draft policy with us? And then I can ask my other questions.
Thank you, MP Arian. I look to the minister. The minister can answer that question from the MP. Minister, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Parliament received the draft policy on February 4th, 2026.
So, Mr. Chairman, as the chair of the committee, can we actually get the policy?
I will look at the secretariat to see if we can get the policy sent, but yeah. MP Arian, go on ahead with your questions.
No, so I think I would appreciate a 5-10 minute break so we can actually get the policy, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if were you aware that we had the policy?
MP, is it an idea for you to finish your questions while we make sure that the policy is sent to the MPs?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I can ask some questions, but I think it's a little unfair to us as members of Parliament, but also unfair to the minister in a way, because I might be asking questions that's actually in the draft policy. So I don't know, again, if we could get a policy, we could discuss, because what I don't want is what happened this morning, the vacations, the minister to say, MPs, well, the draft policy was there, all the questions he asked was right in the policy. I don't want to have that back and forth. So if we could get a policy, we could go over it and then ask my questions.
Thank you, MP. I'll adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes to see if we can get that policy to the MPs pronto. Meeting adjourned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Just for the record, the draft policy was sent to Parliament, and it was in the incoming documents, IS 647, and it was sent to Parliament on February 10th. Mr. MP Arian at the floor. MP, you may continue with your questions to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for you, I'd like to thank the Minister for the presentation. To say that I have faith that the Minister or the government has the ability to execute on the policy will be a stretch. I mean, we've had a lot of promises already. One, like the marketplace, that can't get done in over a year and change. So if we can't get one single marketplace done, I don't see how we're going to do 120 homes in a year. And in the presentation, Mr. Chairman, in the presentation, it was stated that the country lacks data. I think it was stated itself that the country lacks quality, consistent, up-to-date data. So on what exact demand model did the Minister project or create this 1,200 homes? What data did you use then? If we ourselves say we don't have the data or trust the data, where does this number come from? And then we also have, the Minister mentioned that 25% of the population is eligible for social homes. Okay, that would mean that 400, we should be targeting about 400 social homes a year. So why do 120? Why not do the target that we're supposed to meet based on the data given by the government? So any explanation on that? So we're saying that the number is 25%, so why not aim for that 25%? And if we can't aim for that 25% as a government, what is then the solution? Because then we're going to have the same thing again in 10 years that we didn't meet the demand or we didn't supply the demand. And the reason why I am saying that is because I don't personally believe that we should only be focusing on social homes. In the Minister's own press briefings, etc., the Minister says our infrastructure is one thing. So if we're going to add, if the government is going to add 120 social homes, while every other person is still continuing to construct, right now I see like another apartment building going up 20 units, right? Where's the reality when it comes down to our infrastructure, or where they're going to go? And again, I think the more concerning thing for me, and I'm surprised that maybe more MPs didn't mention that, is that if we're saying that we have 25% of our population is in need of social homes, it says a lot about where we are at financially with our people, right? So I would prefer that we say, hey, we have to address the fact that 25% of our population can't afford not even an affordable home, because I want to make a distinction between an affordable home and a social home also. They're not the same. They're not the same. So that means we are in a very bad state because of 25%, and based on your presentation, the data might be even off, so it could be even 30%, right, of our population that is in need of a social home. So I believe then the government has to change their strategy, because we're not going to be able to supply that demand. We're not. It's unrealistic. So based on that alone, I can't then support the current housing policy. I can't. I think then we have to look at other models. First, we should look at increasing then maybe our salaries of our citizens so they can afford the homes that are already in the market. Because there are a lot of homes in the market right now, but it's unattainable for them. So one, maybe we didn't have to look at salaries. We now have to look at wage tax, income tax, because that allows a person with a salary that they have right now, if we lower that, to be able to afford things that are currently on the market and are currently coming on the market. Because construction cost is not going to decrease. And we didn't see that, no data was presented here on that. When we're talking about building homes over 10-year periods, we're not considering inflation costs, we're not considering the inflation, the price of material. So the affordability for government to be able to meet this demand in 10 years, I think is unrealistic. Like I said, there's almost no project that was mentioned in the last 2 years is off the ground now. None. We see right now the Iran war, oil prices are increasing. We see, I saw one shipping company saying a container going for 400 to 1,002 by April. So that means all goods are increasing. Government doesn't have a track record of being able to build, right, and finish on time. So I think with that regard, the numbers are totally off. And I believe that as a government and as a parliament, it's also our responsibility to say, hey, is it realistic for us to meet this demand? No, it's not. We already have the professionals in the field building homes. Maybe we should take a model like the Netherlands, and maybe it might even be cheaper. Maybe, or like the French side, maybe we have to give a subsidy for housing. That model might be a lot cheaper. So those are, like, I think as a government, we have to set an example in, hey, we got to think deeper into this housing policy. There's a lot more things we have to think about, right? We have to say, as a Ministry of VROMI, we have presented a housing policy. We have backed this housing policy up by data by the Ministry of TIAT, the Ministry of VSR, right? Maybe this is the financial components over the next 10 years for us to be able to create these houses. It might make more financial sense for us to say we're going to give a $200 subsidy to every individual that is in need, that then can afford a home in the market. So, and it's going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to now the Minister of VSR coming on board to have the discussion about our social housing. In addition to that, I believe, and I've prepared questions to send to you, Mr. Chairman, to the Minister of VROMI and to the Minister of Finance regarding appraisals. When I started to do I started to analyze data over the last 5 years, 10 years, regarding appraisals. And there's so much discrepancies between appraisers and the values of these same buildings. And even though it cost me money, I've paid for the same also. I've paid for 3 appraisers to appraise the exact same building and got different numbers. And not a margin of error of 2% or 5%, but a margin of error of 20%, a difference of 20%. How can one appraiser today say, for example, X land is 300, another one says $500,000 difference? So yes, we have a housing policy, but a housing policy doesn't address, right, how individuals are being, how are we going to afford these buildings when we're not sure if these buildings are actually valued this amount? Matter of fact, I have an appraisal report done from almost 10 years ago or older. Went back to the exact same appraiser, and today, the building is worth less than, in the same state, less than what it did 10 years ago, by almost 400,000. So I believe if we really want to address the housing crisis in Sint Maarten, right, we have to have a standard, a certified standard when it comes to appraisers, and who gets to give these numbers. Because now we have X bank saying we accept this person, that person, that person. Another bank saying, oh no, we don't accept that person, right? We have to go to somebody else. There's no standard when it comes to appraisals on the island. So one, for sure, right? Before we discuss a housing policy, right, or including them in the housing policy, we have to have a policy or a standard between the Ministry of VROMI and the Ministry of Finance when it comes to appraisal reports. I think a lot of people are getting duped. And I'll give you an even better example. I see the Minister of VROMI, I think in his first month or two, approved for a building 8 hours down in Maho, right? Typically, and you could check in any other country, the value of a building typically would include the land and then the building. Once the land is freehold, what I see appraisals doing in Sint Maarten, especially in areas that a lot of locals can't afford, they include the land that's leased. So you are valuing land that you don't even own and include it in your price to sell to somebody else. With a canon fee of very low amount. How can a local ever compete then? Because I have to do appraisal, based off of my freehold and so forth, whereas a person could base their appraisal for $1 million with land value at 400,000, for example, but the land ain't yours. You could check Aruba that has like a 60%, 70% land lease. You could check other places in the world. The standard would be you cannot you cannot value something or sell something saying that, hey, you get to me this. What you can do is say, hey, this is an economic cost, and this economic cost has a value over long term. But then you have to also do it among by the years that the lease still exists. So I believe we have a long way to go with the housing policy because these concerns have to be addressed. If we really want to fix this, we as members of parliament, we have to address these minor things first, right? To be able to really secure the future. I don't want to come back in 10 years and then another person sitting in their seat saying, hey, why the Parliament of 2026 didn't address these things? And I know, Minister, a lot of maybe the developer friends, etc., wouldn't want this, but that's a reality. I don't even know if that's legal, right, on an international level. Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned before, I appreciate the fact that we stepped into the path of a housing policy. The minister mentioned the Mortgage Guarantee Fund. The Mortgage Guarantee Fund resurrection started when I was there. And my question regarding that would be, have any banks committed to the Mortgage Guarantee Fund? How many? In addition to that, what is the government going to use to back the Mortgage Guarantee Fund? I know then what my idea was to be able to back, because to be able to back loans, you have to back in yourself, right? So is the government going to put cash up? Like, what is the government going to do, right, to be able to back this Mortgage Guarantee Fund? And whatever the answer is that the minister gives, I'm assuming I'll see that answer in the budget, because I don't want to be here to talk about a Mortgage Guarantee Fund, and then the budget comes and I see nowhere in the budget for 2026 that this is backed anywhere. So then I know the Mortgage Guarantee Fund isn't happening nowhere in 2026. I don't have a discussion of a Mortgage Guarantee Fund. The minister mentioned it twice already, I believe. Once the press briefing, I saw an article. So again, if the minister does not have the Mortgage Guarantee Fund backed anywhere in the budget, for me is a fallacy. It's not even true. And like I said before, with all the comments that were made today in the notification, Mr. Chairman, I expect to see these things backed by the most important legislation that we have, which is the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irian. I see MP York has some questions. MP. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in perusing the housing policy, the first question that comes to mind to the minister via you, Mr. Chairman, what are the overlaps in the housing policy as it pertains to the connections to the land policy? Because, Mr. Chairman, it's also a question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And if we're speaking about housing and developing housing on land, I would expect that there will be a connection to the policy which regulates the land. So that's the first question, because the last I knew there was no land policy and it was being worked on, but yet we're here discussing a housing policy before the land policy. So that is the question I would like to ask. And as well, Mr. Chairman, where are these 1,200 homes going? Because the public assumption, I think the most logical assumption, but at the end of the day, it is an assumption, is it's going on the new patch of land that the government acquired recently, the Belvedere Annex. Where is that going? And if the last time the minister was in Parliament and he referenced the land, he also referenced, the minister referenced via you, Mr. Chairman, the different usages that they would like to use the land for, being a cemetery, housing, I think something for recreation and sports, The land already has a culture aspect to it, being the plantation and ruins that are on it right now. I would like to understand if the minister already has some sort of, what they use the terminology, a vlekkenplan on how the indailing of this is going to go, and what, after using it for culture, sports, cemetery, what is exactly left when it comes to space for housing. And when I say space, that space is also, I would like the infrastructure part of it to be deducted as well, because infrastructure takes up anywhere between 20 to 35% of your available space. So I would like to know what amount of space is left after all these, I would say, objectives have been met. Also, how much space is the current Belvedere? So what's the size of the current Belvedere area, the developed side of it, and how many houses, homes does it comprise of? And seeing that we're speaking about housing and where housing is going, where exactly is the cemetery going to be placed on the property bought? Because I understand that the cemetery is going to be placed somewhere on that property. There is a lot of assumptions on whether it's on one side of the Belvedere and the next side of the Belvedere. Where is the cemetery exactly being placed, and how much space is being allotted to the cemetery? Lastly, Mr. Chairman, this policy, from what I'm seeing so far, identifies the problem very clearly, the problem being housing. But I don't see the transition to how it's going to be dealt with. It also mentions two things, that being a lot of private partnership. So basically a lot of it is going to be developed by the private sector. But one of the reasons for housing is because of the housing problem, is because the lack of social housing, the private sector has had a serious explosion when it comes to inflation. And if the private sector is going to be severely involved in developing this development, aren't we then asking the problem to fix the problem? Because I'm not seeing any regulatory steps as yet into how the problem that we have today would not be, for example, a Belvedere Part 2. And lastly, I don't see any control mechanisms in the policy. It mentions monitoring, it mentions evaluation, but what happens when things go wrong? So there's no, the policy cannot self-correct itself, and normally you would have to have some kind of control mechanisms in the policy. I don't see any KPIs, I don't see any reporting frequency, I don't see any consequences when it comes to failure. What happens when this policy fails to meet its target? Because the policy is developed for a particular reason. And lastly, and because I haven't read the whole policy, this is then a question I would like to ask. Does this policy encompass the general essence of the housing problem on Sint Maarten, or is it more geared towards what is to come in the development of the housing sector in Sint Maarten? That would be it for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. I now give the floor to MP Jansen-Webster. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realized that I forgot to ask one question, which was regarding renewable energy. If there were any plans, we've seen on the French side, for instance, with the government houses, you would see that they would put solar on the houses. If there are any plans to incorporate any kind of renewable energy with these new houses that are being built. And then a question that came in from a listener who indicated that currently there are a lot of issues by the various houses that government already has, or the houses that are administered by the Sint Maarten Housing Development Foundation regarding sewage. And if these new houses that will be built, if they will be connected then to the sewage system, will all of that be taken into account one time when they are being built? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Ansel Webster. I now give the floor to MP Irian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just want to bring clarity to the comments that were made earlier regarding the land policy, because I got some comments from the public about how come the document there, etc. I want to be very clear that the document that came in didn't have or the document that is in Teams then doesn't have any name to it. So I don't think any member of Parliament will know that this is the land policy. It just states the IS 647 with VROMI. It doesn't mention the land policy. But even more so, that's why I asked in the beginning, what are we discussing here today? Because in the agenda points for your meeting today, IS 647 is not an agenda point. We have specific agenda points, which is the IS 105 and IS 396. So that's what. So it really has to have a better coordination between the minister and the chair regarding what we're discussing today, because that's why I was confused, because on a really technical level, we're not supposed to be discussing the land policy itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Irian. I now give the floor to MP Roseberg for her questions. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to the questions that my colleagues already asked, and also for sake of completeness, while scrolling through the draft policy, and also the fact that the ministry is seeking feedback, I will provide you with my feedback so far. My colleague, MP Irian, mentioned the part of appraisers, and I would like to go a little deeper into that through you, Mr. Chair, seeing that based on research I did so far after receiving this document, I have seen that there are entities that, for example, in the Netherlands, supervise appraisers. And currently, we don't have that on Sint Maarten. So, seeing that the question was asked by my colleague, MP Irian, and the policy is not finalized as yet, is it, seeing the feedback given here today, will the ministry consider including in this policy the possibility to have an official registry, also have a disciplinary board for appraisers, so that the gaps which my colleague mentioned can also be controlled, because at this moment it is not controlled. And if we're making a policy and we're seeking feedback for that policy, it would be wise to have, for the sake of completeness, that also mentioned in the policy. So I would like to know how the ministry is looking at that, because that will also avoid that, for example, banks cannot state anymore like, okay, we're not making use of a certain appraiser because you have to go through a list, and you also need to stay up to date, and there will then be similar measurements and not too much difference, for example, if you're buying or if you're selling. So that is one of the feedback points. Other than that as well, I have seen that in regards to cadastre, how will that connection be made with the cadastre and also the appraisers to determine realistic market value? That's not, based on, again, how I mentioned, the part of buying versus selling. And in that regards, the protection for the consumers itself when they're buying based on those reports. So it boils down again to that supervision board and having that oversight. Then in regards to the rental tribunal, which we have on Sint Maarten, how, when there are, for example, disputes in this regard, in connection to rental prices, because it's also mentioned in the policy in Chapter 10, for the ones that might want to know. In that chapter, how are we making sure that the ones in the tribunal at this moment have the sufficient information, data, and expertise to carry out based on said policy? Was there consultation with the banking sector in regards to this policy? And if not, also feedback, maybe that can be considered. Let me see. Based on the current gaps in the policy, and my colleague MP York also mentioned the part of enforcement options, because when you make a policy, there should be consequences when you're not following said policy. So is it also still in development, seeing that it's a draft policy? This is my feedback so far. If I have further feedback awaiting the questions, then those will follow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. And I'll give the floor to MP La Cruz for his questions. MP, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon once again, Mr. Chairman, Griffier, and Minister. I only have one suggestion. House policy, and to be totally honest, I've not gotten the time to run through it properly as yet, especially because I didn't know that was going to be discussed today. But I like the idea of 120 homes, and I plead that those homes are going to go to teachers, police officers, immigration officers, custom officers, guards, everyone that government owes money. That should be priority, in my opinion. And I think it should be a nice idea that government stands guarantee in one way or the other, so that our people can really get affordable homes and not rented, but their own homes. So, and then I'm looking forward to the answers from the minister to the questions of the others, and then I'll see what comes up for the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I see that MP Jansen-Webster still has a question. MP, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've heard now two people, the minister and one MP, mention a list of people who they would like to see have those homes. On none of those lists, I heard GEBE workers. GEB workers are some of the hardest working people out there in Sint Maarten, and I think that they too, the utility company, they too are one of the frontline workers, and they should be mentioned as employers who should get access to these homes. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Jansen-Webster. MP La Cruz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I forgot to mention the telem workers that are actually suffering right now. They also need homes. Yeah. So, Minister, after this, you will get that Batman suit and save and give everybody homes. Thank you.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. Before we continue, I would like to make one thing clear. The agenda points for this meeting were to discuss the state of national housing in Sint Maarten, including government planning, land use, and institutional capacity. The topic of this meeting was not the housing policy. So the presentation from the minister was about the current state of housing, but now it seems that the discussion has basically shifted towards the actual housing policy, but that is not a topic of discussion for this meeting. I would just like to put that on record. And I now give the floor to MP Arian. I see that he has one more question. MP, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I see a little disappointment in the minister's face. I can understand why, because the minister's presentation on the first slide was housing policy for Sint Maarten, and he's agreeing. So, Mr. Chairman, what you just said is not what the minister presented, the minister literally presented the housing policy. If we check the sovereignty, the first slide of the minister, that's what it said. And since we are throwing in suggestions of who should get the housing, and I'll throw in my own. The Telem was on my list also, but I'll also throw in the workers at the medical center, right? All the nurses are also in the housing, and of course I can't forget all of the civil servants and our staff here in Parliament also. So the list is going to get bigger and bigger, Minister.
Thank you, MP Irian. I see MP York wants the floor. MP, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I know at times, we tend to get jovial during these meetings. I would just like to impart on the minister that although there were some jokes made just now, it's a very serious problem. And just for clarity, all those sectors are sectors that are in dire need of housing. But I would like to remind the minister he's a minister of everyone, and everyone needs housing. So the criteria to how people can become eligible for this housing is paramount and needs to be clear. Also, how to dovetail off of the feedback just given, is there going to be a distinction between civil servants and the rest of the public in the eligibility criteria for this development? It's an unpopular question, but it's a question that needs to be answered because we have to, the government has to manage the expectations of people that put them there. So at the end of the day, where can a police officer expect particular type of treatment? Can a nurse expect a particular type of treatment? Can a regular civil servant expect a particular type of treatment? And what does that mean for John, Dick, and Harry that is not a civil servant that applying for housing? And going back on something very important that MP Jansen Webster mentioned, what does that mean for the people that are already applied and already on the list? Does the ministry still have this list? Because I remember with the whole land discussion, there was talks on a list being lost, on a list not being accurate, on a list not being up to date when it came to land use, and the ministers had some contradicting statements here on the floor of Parliament stating people have to apply all over again. Then he took it back and then he said, no, that's not the case. What is the case as it pertains to the housing waiting list, as it pertains to what's there and what is to come? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP York. I see MP La Cruz desires the floor. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to dovetail off the previous speaker, the list was not a list to be made fun of. It was not. I am extremely serious about it. I spoke about that before. I remember when the police officers, there were police housing on the Pondfield. So I am extremely serious about that. That is a way that we can maybe curve some of what is already owed to these persons. And then, Mr. Chairman, I got a message, and I'm not going to say that it was mine, so the foster children, the children that are aged out, housing for these kids. So I'm starting to wonder if 120 a year would be enough and how we are going to even get there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. I don't see any more MPs that wish the floor. I will adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes to caucus with the minister. Meeting adjourned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. After discussing with the minister has made it clear that he would need approximately 3 weeks to answer the questions posed on agenda point 1. Therefore, I will adjourn agenda point 1 at this particular moment. And we will proceed with agenda point 2, which is the follow-up discussion with the Minister of VROMI on the cemetery capacity development planning and related infrastructure policy. IS 396, dated November 26, 2025. On November 26, 2025, Parliament received a letter from MP D.T.J with the same aforementioned IS 396 with the request that a meeting be convened with the Minister of VROMI to discuss the aforementioned agenda point. Hence today, this agenda point. I look to MP York to see if you would like to elucidate his request. Yes, indeed. MP, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, the request is pretty much straightforward. We have basically the minister announced a cemetery space crisis last year, and with the recent news on land acquisition in a new cemetery, I think it's important for current and future homeowners to know exactly what the specifics are, and future families who will be in need of a cemetery, what they can expect from when it comes to differences between how things are done now to how they can potentially be done moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP York, who is the requester of this meeting. I now look to the minister for his opening remarks and presentation on agenda point 2. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, good afternoon now to the members of Parliament, those listening and viewing online. The presentation today will focus predominantly on the maintenance of Cul-de-sac Cemetery. Why? Because in a previous discussion, we actually outlined a number of changes that are happening in the discussions with the other cemeteries, and we'll get into that as to why this focus is on Cul-de-sac versus the others, and also provide an update on where we are in those discussions as well. Sint Maarten is governed by a national ordinance formally titled, in English, National Ordinance Revising Provisions on Burials and Cemeteries and Establishing Rules Regarding Burial Rights and the Transport of Human Remains to and from Sint Maarten. The ordinance provides the primary legal framework for the following: burials and interment requirements, including coffins, grave types, depth, and conditions, designation, establishment, and approval of cemeteries, burial rights and grave use, transportation of deceased persons in and out of Sint Maarten, and finally, exceptional circumstances such as emergency burials or suspected unnatural deaths requiring prosecutorial approval. The ordinance falls under the mandate of the Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, VSA. The Ministry of VROMI contributes to the overall oversight and maintenance of public cemeteries. And I think this is a point that we've stressed quite often, that while cemeteries are associated with VROMI, the overall management of the legislation and all the different mechanisms and legal frameworks was actually under the Minister of VSA. Cul-de-sac cemetery capacity, March 2026. The Cul-de-sac cemetery capacity is indeed a challenge. The Ministry of VROMI continues to find remedies to continuously stretch and maximize the available space. On average, there are 14 to 16 burials per month at this cemetery. Important to note, this is also the only public cemetery on Sint Maarten. All the others are privately listed, but of course there is involvement of government, and we are working, of course, to outline what those guidelines will be going forward. Cul-de-sac cemetery current construction activities. VROMI has procured and overseeing the construction of 42 additional vaults since our last update, I believe, 2 months ago. And this is a bit of an older picture. We're actually, the old picture, we're actually quite far ahead on this development of these 42 additional vaults. Cul-de-sac cemetery next steps, short to midterm. As we've indicated, there's a challenge of space in the cul-de-sac cemetery, and the ministry has identified 5 potential areas within which we can actually increase space at the current time. So my apologies if the slide is not necessarily as visible, but I will try my best to explain so that everyone, both in the Tribune and also online, can understand what I'm saying. So we have 5 areas identified, ranging from Area 1, which is the area just below the highest point of the vaults. That area, we are currently constructing the 42 vaults that we showed in the previous slide. We have Area 2. There's an opportunity for additional 5 vaults. Area 3 is an opportunity to build similar to Area 1. Area 3 is just below the where the first initial vaults were built when the space became limited several years ago. Area 4, opportunity to build vaults, however, requires liaison with the Ministry of VSA. In particular, this area is known as a depository for a lot of the medical-related waste, and as such, there's stronger requirements in terms of its reuse. And finally, opportunity Area 5 for burials around the historical monument area, which is a Dutch Reformed church, and the tomb of John Phillips. This requires liaison with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports. This area has been identified for the potential use of urns from cremation. Moving on now to mid and more long-term solutions, legal and policy changes. The Ministry of VROMI and VSR are in discussions on the future burial policies. Current legislation allows for reuse of plots, but does not make mention of related fees. VSR is busy reviewing this. In addition, a follow-up meeting with the focal points is forthcoming next week. A new cemetery. With the overall development concept for the newly purchased area in Belvedere, it is envisioned that a designated portion of the land will be allocated for cemetery use. The location of this is currently being evaluated with the assistance of GIS and the recently launched Climate Atlas for the most optimum use of the land. Just to clarify, the part that is under the stewardship of the Ministry of VROMI is the orange-colored part. And of course, this brings us to the very end of our brief update on the status of burials currently. In the previous meeting, we underscored some of the changes we're actually making regarding legislation about the finally implementing the reuse of plots, but also the new fees associated with burials, noting that the fees don't match the current realities of the country. And a final comment on this too is that, as I stated, government actually only has one public cemetery, which is the cul-de-sac cemetery. K Bay, Simpson Bay, and the Methodist and Roman Catholic are all in private management, and we are in discussions with the focal points for that on the future responsibilities and guidelines of the maintenance of those grounds. Why? Because private cemeteries, in principle, should not be maintained fully by government. There is a role for the private holder to play, and that's a discussion we are having ongoing as well. So of course, I will not share too much on the future of that development because it is a working discussion, ongoing discussion, sorry. And with that, it brings to end the presentation, and look forward to any questions from the members of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Minister, for that presentation. I now look to the MPs. I see that MP York is first to speak. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Minister for his presentation. Mr. Chairman, there's one thing in the presentation that wasn't really clear. The Minister alluded to the green and the, let's say, orange color, and that the orange color, please, and that the orange color was under control of the government, and the green not of VROMI, and the green not. I didn't understand that part, so the Minister can explain that again when he has the word. Also, in the example of the current state at the cul-de-sac cemetery, am I to understand that in area 4, where there are a few open spaces, a few green spaces, well, not green spaces in the literal term, but a few open spaces, that vaults will be put on those areas just ad hoc, up two-story here, three vaults there, 3 vaults there, and just spread randomly along the cemetery. That I want to understand if that's what I understood by the explanation, because that sounds kind of, I understand the need for space, but it sounds kind of, for the lack of a better word, crazy. So can the minister explain the thought process behind that decision? Also, is there a formal capacity forecast based on the mortality trends and the burial practices? So we're putting aside space, or the Minister of VROMI is putting aside space, but is the size of the space being allocated to the new cemetery based on any mortality trends data? The minister explained measures. I don't go just going down my questions. The minister already explained the measures for the capacity, what he'll do for the capacity crisis. What sites have been identified or assessed for cemetery expansion or new cemetery development? Because in the point where the minister spoke on, in the orange area where the cemetery will be coming, and that's still being identified, can the minister give a bit more explanation to the area in which, is it to the right side, left side, back, front? Because, Minister, it's a topic that inhabitants, people that live in the area, really want to know. And aside from that, in the minister identifying where exactly it's going to come, has the minister had any public consultations on the matter? Because I would not like to assume that the minister will be putting a cemetery in someone's backyard or someone's potential backyard and not discussing it with the people of the area. What's the timeline for the decision-making on cemetery expansion, and what milestones should the public expect when it comes to specific dates? Because the last time, Mr. Chairman, when the minister was in Parliament, for the question hour to be precise, a lot of the things the minister said now, he said then. And this was a couple of months ago. I think maybe 5 months to be exact, maybe 6. So what has been done from then to now as it pertains to being able to share information with Parliament and thus the people? Has the ministry considered any land use alternatives, operational reforms, or policy reforms related to burial management? So can the minister explain any policies, change of policies, the burial management, anything to measure and to maintain the mechanism moving forward? That would be it for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP York, for those questions. I now see that MP Jansen Webster wants the floor. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the Minister for his presentation. The NIMBY phenomenon, not in my backyard. I heard the speaker before me speak about people being concerned about a cemetery being close to them or in their backyard, etc. We live on a small island, and I think that people will be surprised to know, people who have been around for a while know that that same area there, that Belvedere, what's called now a Belvedere Annex, or Belvedere by the house, the old house, that there is a cemetery. And for us, let's say I'm a little bit the older generation, but also the old Sint Maarten people who used to tend to animals around there, I can assure you that's one of the, what we used to call one of the biggest Jumbi spots, because it was a slave burial ground, especially right there on the corner. So it's already there. So now with a cemetery, I think people need to realize the area that they are in already. But moving on to my question, people in Sint Maarten are very unique in the sense that a lot of people have dual nationality. My question is, can people living on the Dutch side of Sint Maarten be buried on the French side? and what is the criteria? And also similarly, can people living on French St. Maarten be buried on Dutch St. Maarten as well? And if that is now taking place, I ask this question because I too come from a family that originates from the French side. And if you look at us being members of the French Quarter Church, talking about where you were baptized, where you go to church, etc. And so you would think that you then would go to that church to be buried or whatever. So with the capacity problems, are there discussions between the two sides of the island with moving bodies? What is the current status of that? Thank you.
Thank you, MP Jansen-Webster. I now give the floor to MP Arian. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think I appreciate the fact that the minister showed the purchase of Belvedere, because I think this is a good example of what we discussed in Agenda Point 1, where if you have a vision, you put the money in CapEx and get it done, because the Belvedere purchase was actually done in a previous budget by the previous government. So the plans, et cetera, is being executed by the minister now. But those ideas, the concept of preparation was done by the previous government, because that's something that we believed in. Mr. Chairman, the minister mentioned that the green, orange is VROMI, green is MECIS. So I would like to understand, for clarity, was this part of the sales agreement? So in the sales agreement, in government, there's a document that says X land, May brief is under MECIS, and the other portion is under VROMI. Because in the CapEx, again, when we put a CapEx there, that was under VROMI. So I really would like clarity on that. So like how did the government do this? I know we have a lot of unconventional ways doing things in this government, so I'm pretty sure it falls under that category. But yes, just for clarity's sake, so we could, again, guide other ministers when they also come to Parliament and they're stuck in certain ways, that we could explain to them that your other colleague did it this way. MP Veronica Janssen mentioned something, which is true, regarding the Jombi area in Belvedere. But I would like to state, or I would like the minister to clarify, didn't the sellers themselves say during your discussions that they don't want a burying ground in any place? So I don't think it's only up to the government. I think it was stated already where they don't want it. So I think that would be a good place to put it, right, in following historical reasons. But can the minister clarify? Matter of fact, can the minister indicate which areas would be allowed, or which areas did the sellers say, we don't want this here? For example, can the burying ground be on the roadside? Is it, even if the government wanted to, can it be put on the roadside? Mr. Chairman, regarding the vaults, I saw the minister said 2 vaults. Unfortunately, people are dying at a pretty fast rate. Almost every week, there's a funeral, a wake, etc. But I don't see, let's say, the urgency. When we were there, the Ministry of VROMI said there's an urgency when it comes to the vaults and burying grounds and room. There's no room. And that's actually what started the process of the purchasing of Belvedere. Because of that meeting with the department head of New Works and Infrastructure, indicating the fact that we are going to run out of space very, very soon, is why we ended up looking at, hey, let's look for places to buy land for burial. We have to do a policy with VSR, and at least then we could also get land to do housing, etc., etc. In this presentation, I don't see that urgency. So as members of Parliament, we're not informed of, okay, we have 1 year left to get X done. Yes, it stated that VSR is working on a plan. Where are they with this plan? Have they communicated that with you? So we could also hold VSR accountable, because they have, yes, you're going to do your part, but we need to hold VSR accountable also. So how far is that plan? Where are we? What's the timeline? Because we can't wait until we reach a point where we say we have 5 vaults left, and then, God forbid, people are dying, and then we're stuck. Minister, again, what I don't typically appreciate with this government is the constant making promises and saying we're going to do something and it isn't done. And this isn't coming from me, this is coming from the KB community. The Ministry of VROMI promised the KB community, right, that a pilot project would be done regarding the cemetery down there. That was more, I believe, more than 8 months ago, 9 months ago, could probably be even a year, all right? No further update has happened. The road in KB going to the cemetery, I know they've also sent letters already, they've complained already, is littered with these big containers from this business. Can we get the road to the cemetery cleaned up? We have to show some type of respect for the ones that passed away. And just the route to get there, it just doesn't look good. So can we get the area cleaned up? And also, will the minister execute the pilot project that was promised? Why promise something if we're not going to do it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Arian. I now give the floor to MP La Cruz. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the minister, is there a way that we could receive that policy? Because I've been looking for it and I can't find it. Or the law, whatever it is that he mentioned first, if we could get, if I could get my hands on that. Then in his presentation, he spoke of the spot number 4, and if I understood properly, the minister mentioned that that spot was to use to dispose of medical, I think, parts of operation, whatever. My question to that, why are these not cremated instead and taking up space? Then another question, if I would want, for example, to be buried on my own property, is that possible? I saw, for example, being young, growing up on the French side, I saw that it was possible on the French side. So I want to know if that's possible here on the Dutch side. Then, and maybe I missed it, a timeline on when that whole expansion will be finished. What date? And if this is in the budget for 2026, I'd like to know that also. And then just seeing the vergrijzing from our population here on Sint Maarten, if any other solutions have been brainstormed, thought about, cremation, space-efficient systems. If the minister has any feedback on that. And then one more question. All my other questions were asked. If cemeteries are currently compliant with environmental and public health standards. And then I got one more for the minister. And it's because I'm not versed in death. I hate it, but when someone dies, a request goes into VROMI to be able to be buried. There's a fee to that, okay? Does the person or the family then own that piece of land? If not, can then another person be buried above that grave, not related to that person? That is a question that I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP La Cruz. And I'll go over to MP York. MP, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the minister would be so kind and bring back up the slide with the orange and green, please. We have it up. See, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Okay, almost there.
We are awaiting the presentation to be put back on the screen. There we go. Is this the slide you were referring to, MP York?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Minister. To come back on the initial question that, thank you, MP Jansen, for adding to what I was speaking on and actually brought more context, thus bringing me to this point. There's the orange and the green side, and I understand now the question has been answered in the meantime. The orange side is for VROMI development and the green side is for Meki's development. Okay. The Jumbi area that MP Jansen referred to is on the green side, the south side, right? Jumbi area meaning the former historical gravesite. That's known by, the older folk and, the public. That's already on the south side. Is the minister now saying we're going to have a historical burial area on the south side that already exists and we're going to put a new one on the north side? So we're going to have, in the future, an old burial spot on the south side, and we're going to put a new one on the north side. So I just want to understand that properly, because if we're talking about bundling, I don't think that would be the best way to distribute space, because then we effectively would have two cemeteries, two burial spots on one plot of land. So if the minister can, and seeing that the orange spot is 130,000 square meters, there's a significant amount of that would have to go to burial. By the time you subtract that, and then you subtract the land that is going to be used for infrastructure for the housing, I now question, I'm even more worried to how the minister is going to realize that amount of housing in that area, seeing that it will all come or potentially come in the orange side. So if the minister can bring more meat to the discussion as it pertains to the distribution of land in that area, as it pertains to housing and cemetery, I would appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. I don't see any other MPs who wish to speak on the topic. I will adjourn the meeting for 2 minutes to discuss with the minister how to move forward. Meeting adjourned. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. After a brief discussion with the minister has indicated that he would need approximately 2 weeks to gather the answers to the questions posed on agenda point 2. Therefore, I would like to adjourn this meeting until a later date. That will be discussed with Secretariat. I see that MP York wants the floor. I'll allow it. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You referenced 2 weeks for the second agenda point. I don't know if I missed it, but I don't remember the same reference being made for the first agenda point. Three weeks for the first one. So what does that mean? We're going to have 2 separate meetings, or we're still going to have 1 meeting with the 2 agenda points?
The minister asked for 3 weeks for agenda point 1 and 2 weeks for agenda point 2. So I will leave it up to the minister to contact Secretariat as to when he would have the answers for both agenda points, because I don't think that we can split the agenda points at this moment because the meeting is already called. So I urge the minister to gather all of the answers for agenda point 1 and 2 as quickly as he can, and then to contact Secretariat to reschedule the meeting. But if he said 3 weeks for agenda point 1 and 2 weeks for this one, then I will assume that 3 weeks should suffice for all answers. I'm looking at the MPs, see if we're all in agreement. Yes. All right. Then I would like to thank the minister today for coming here to Parliament and for his presentation on both agenda points. I hereby adjourn this meeting.